Hey Stephen, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
So thanks everyone for joining us on this episode. I've got Stephen Pavlovich, founder of CRO agency Conversion.com, who's going to kind of chat to us over the next 30 minutes about CRO and the discipline of improving revenue online.
Sounds good.
Perfect. So just in case you're joining for the first time, if you like what you hear, please consider subscribing. You can find this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, or go and check out overdrivedigital.co.uk. And if you like it, please do subscribe. So, Stephen, really kind of interested to dig into CRO. We were kind of just chatting earlier about like my general observation of CRO as a discipline is that on the surface it's a total no-brainer. Like, we're getting traffic to the website, we need to improve revenue, we need to make sure our sites are converting well. However, it seems to be underinvested in, I think, as a discipline, just as an observation. There also seems to be a pretty big knowledge gap in the area. Like, there are very few real specialists, I think. So really keen to hear your thoughts on that. But first off, like, what is Conversion.com? Who are you? What's the story?
Sure. So Conversion.com, we're an agency based in London. We service clients across the UK and internationally. We work with big brands like Domino's, The Guardian. We've done a lot of work with Facebook in the past as well, all the way through to startups, fast-growing companies as well. So ranging in size from kind of one person, super affiliates, all the way through to organisations with thousands of employees.
Wow, and I'm guessing every one of those has their own unique challenges in terms of CRO.
Yeah, totally. I think it's very hard to see the. I guess no two clients are alike. Each will have their own quirks depending on the market that they're in, the clients that they're trying to attract, and the challenges that they face.
Excellent. I guess, so generally speaking, you're brought in as an agency and a group of specialists to address a conversion rate problem. Mm-hmm. So is that normally because people have hit a brick wall? Is it a long-term play? Are people kind of panicking about a drop in conversions? What's the normal situation where you're being pulled into a business? So
there's a few different scenarios. There's one which is that kind of panic that you say, like, often people will redesign their website, launch it, hope for the best, and then see that sales drop immediately after, that they fall off a cliff. And then they've got that awkward choice of, do we scrap it and just write off the last 6 months, 12 months of work and all of the investment that went into that? Or do we live with it and try and fix it? And so often they will come to us in that scenario. Recently that happened with some pretty big businesses. It's a fairly common scenario, bizarrely so, that in 2019 we're still seeing that, but so it is. That's relatively common. At the other extreme, you've got the companies that are doing really well, and they are spending a shit ton of money on paid search and social. They're acquiring as much as they possibly can, but they know that the one thing holding them back is their conversion rate. Because if they optimize that, then not only do they get more sales immediately, but also it makes their acquisition much more profitable straight away. And then you get the people who are kind of somewhere between the two. They're not panicking, they're not doing super well, but they just know that there's a good opportunity in conversion optimization. They might have done a bit of it to know that there's an opportunity there, but also to realize that they need a specialist to do it properly. And also we will support companies who have a really strong culture of data and experimentation, but they recognize that getting that external perspective and expertise and resource can significantly increase the returns that they're getting.
Got you. So I'm guessing they're quite different scenarios there. So client in a state of panic, I'm guessing your kind of introduction to that business and kind of getting embedded and getting things going is going to be very different to I guess a business that's made a conscious decision to invest in this long term because they know it's something they need to do, right?
Yeah, totally. So we'll often see that the relationship that we have with a client will change over time. Many of our clients we've worked with 3, 4, 5 years, and it will, there can be kind of several different phases within that. So you're totally right. Like if we worked with a very big SaaS company who were in that kind of oh shit, we just redesigned our website and it's not working scenario. So we started work with them. They're based in California. We started work on that project. It was quite a delicate project, as you can imagine, because you've got to manage all the stakeholders who are involved in that redesign. But then from the success of that initial project, we then expanded it out multiple times. We got involved in other markets as well, in email optimization too. So that can just be the hook to get people in, to show them the potential that experimentation has.
Yeah, I was going to ask really, and you read a lot online about CRO, and I think there's probably, like with any marketing activity, people are chasing like a silver bullet or a quick win, and I'm sure there are quick wins involved, but to get the best long-term output, like how much influence do you have over the website itself, but also ad copy, traffic that's coming into the website, email, because surely it's all got to, the best results are going to come from a stack of activity that's all working together, right?
Yeah, totally. So typically when we work with a client, we will analyze the customer journey end to end. So from the point of acquisition, from them clicking on an ad or starting a search, through to landing on the website, placing their order, we will always look to become clients or customers of our clients as well.
Yeah.
So that doesn't mean that we will just try and analyze it by looking at analytics or anything like that. We'll actually buy and use the products ourselves as far as we possibly can. So we look to analyze the end-to-end process. But in terms of where we actually test, 9 times out of 10 is focused on the website and the customer experience within that.
So you start there first, you get that right, and then you can kind of go on to experiment with things on the periphery or marketing channels.
You totally can. I mean, other times we will just work. If there's a third party that's handling the acquisition, then we might work more closely with them to share. These are the insights that we've got from optimizing on the website. This is what we know works for the customers. This is what motivates them. This is what stops them from converting, and then they can share the same likewise to say, this is what stopped us from, or this is how we've optimized the ad copy over time.
Got you. Because I guess from our perspective, we're working on that front bit of running paid social campaigns, running paid search campaigns, and there's got to be a crossover there, because if you've got a third party running PPC, for example, and that's sending traffic to one of your tests, that traffic has to be good, right? They can't just throw bad traffic at a test, because that's going to, I imagine, ruin everything, right? So do you have to step in sometimes and go, look, it ain't going to work with this? Or
no, I mean, I guess the advantage with A/B testing is that you're neutralizing any other factors. So if you've got a lousy ad or a lousy campaign, it's going to slow down the test, but it's going to affect the A variation and the B variation the same. So it's not really going to cause a problem as such. But obviously if you get if you start sending a load of junk traffic to a website, unless you can easily exclude that traffic, it's going to add a lot of noise to the data and make it harder to detect any change in performance.
Got you. Okay, so it's pretty fundamental, I imagine, to just at least get the basics right with the traffic.
Yeah.
And where do people start? Because obviously, we work with lots of different brands, and sure, everyone's got experience of using websites that just have fundamental UX issues, or there are just obvious things to fix first, or perhaps a brand hasn't built up enough traffic yet to make anything substantial that you're running. Do you recommend that people get those basic UX things fixed first, or get a certain level of traffic, or do brands have to be at a certain point to make this worthwhile?
So for A/B testing, obviously having the traffic is a pretty fundamental requirement for that.
Yep.
So if you don't have the traffic, then it probably doesn't make sense to do A/B testing until you've got that in place. If you do have the traffic, but you're just not sure where to start, then you absolutely can kind of try and get the worst off, as it were. But then the danger with that is often the stuff that people think will work doesn't. We had an instance recently with a client where their design agency wanted to make a change for an upcoming redesign, ironically. And we A/B tested that just one of the changes in isolation and found out that it would have cost them 7 or even 8 figures per year in revenue if they'd made that one change.
Oh my goodness. So
this is like, yes, you can, the stuff that you think will work won't always, but also there's a value in testing it. Even if you test it and it does work, there's a value for you in seeing like what was the observed improvement during the experiment. Was it a 2% uplift or a 20% uplift?
But in that case, you've stepped in and stopped a critically bad decision being made. So there's huge value in that as well, surely.
Yeah, for sure. So I mean, I guess we think about what we do as less. I don't know, kind of the way a lot of people think about conversion optimization is like A/B testing landing pages and headline copy and buttons and stuff like that. Whereas we see it as using experimentation as a form of validation, and you can use that to validate, should we go with this design or that design, or this copy or that copy, but also should we launch this product or that product, and what should we charge for it, and what should our free delivery threshold be, and what should our returns policy be, and which market should we enter next even? These are all the kind of questions that we like to answer with experimentation.
Yeah, so it's about as far removed from red button or blue button as you can possibly get, really. We're talking about the entire ecosystem, or like value being added there. And like, how rare is it, or common, to get a client that, or like a business that truly understands that from the off? Like, do you find that that's quite commonplace to kind of step in and there's that culture already in terms of, right, we're getting redesigned, let's plan ahead, let's get you guys in, let's validate the designs?
It's very, very rare. I mean, I would say even the companies that a lot of people look up to as the bastions of experimentation and data-driven culture, even within them, like I was at one of those companies this week, and they were saying essentially, we're not sure that experimentation works for us, or we're not, they know that there's still an opportunity to drive it even further.
Yep.
So I think it's very, very rare that you get a company that has that sort of attitude from the outset. They might have the right ambition, but not necessarily the ability. So the ambition, the ability, and delivering on that, it's very, very rare that you get all three together. I think you might have one or two if you're lucky.
It's similar in a lot of different channels, though, I think. Like, to get people to think about it in the right way, or, there's always education, isn't there?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think it's something that we do very well at conversion.com. So, like, with one of our clients, we've been working with them, I think we're in year 3 now. We started off kind of focusing on how do we increase the order conversion rate, how to increase AOV, the kind of the type of work that you would expect. But now we're helping them test all sorts of stuff like product, pricing, commercials, are the kind of bigger strategic questions. And this is a bricks and mortar company that has become predominantly a digital company. Okay. And it's fantastic to see that kind of turnaround, because you might expect it in an Amazon or a Facebook or Booking.com or whoever. Yeah. But it's very, very rare to see that kind of digital growth in what was a bricks and mortar company.
And that must have a huge impact on the results that these experiment, like that culture of experimentation, can influence. Because if they're looking at it like that, surely the results are going to be better, right?
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's the performance is massive for them. I think both from the regular A/B testing to improve order conversion rate and AOV, but when you consider some of the bigger strategic questions that we can answer, like this is the stuff that the only way that people would answer that before would be through kind of expensive research projects that would last for 12 months, and then by the time you actually implement it, you might find out that it was out of date or inaccurate or misleading in the first place. Whereas we can answer the same kind of questions in a matter of days with A/B testing.
Wow, yeah, it's massively powerful. So earlier on, you were talking about analysis and I guess like really getting under the skin of a business and buying the product and using the product and like, how long is that initial research phase for you, and like what does it typically include? So you mentioned a few things there, but before you even come up with a list of experimentations, what sort of work is done?
It's a really good question. I think we've a few years back we used to be quite puritanical, I guess would be the right word, in that we would say to a client, like, we're not going to start a single A/B test until we've completed our research phase, and that can be 4 weeks plus. And so, you start on day one and the client's kind of like waiting for the first test to go live. And so by the time we finally get there, we've got a huge amount of insight. We know exactly where to focus. We understand a hell of a lot about their customers, what's motivating them, what's stopping them from converting, and we can build a really powerful roadmap. Since then, we've found a very good balance between the two. So we look at essentially minimum viable insights.
Okay.
The same way that you might talk about an MVP, where we know enough, or we've gathered enough data to start testing.
Yeah.
So typically with our clients, we will present the first concepts on day one, meaning that we've done some upfront research already, typically for the pitch, to give us enough of an idea of where we would want to start and what the first concept should be. And I think the win rate for our first experiments is something crazy, like it's over 50%, like 60 or 70% of our first experiments win. So
wow.
We've got a good track record, and essentially what that means is that buys us the time, because it then puts us in a fantastic place with the client, but it also means that while we're building, launching, analysing that test, we can also be gathering quant and qual data from analytics, from their internal data. We can talk to their sales staff and customer service staff. We can buy and use the products ourselves. We can go out and talk to customers. We can do user tests and on-site surveys and off-site surveys, and we've even commissioned YouGov to run polls for us in the past to better understand market sentiment and all this kind of stuff that we can do at the same time as we're running the experiments.
And starting to make a bit of impact at the same time. Yeah. And within that research phase, let's say you're working in a business, you know this needs to be done, you want to start that journey, if you like. Like, what sort of research would you recommend that people do to start gathering a bit of evidence, to start thinking about what ideas that they can put in and what tests they can run? Like,
sure.
Where do you start?
Yeah, so the mistake that most people make is that they kind of come up with a checklist of research methods to do, like user test, analytics, like the things that I just mentioned. Whereas the right place to start is essentially to identify what are the questions that we're trying to answer about the website, the market, the customers, the business, whatever it happens to be. And then for each of those questions, you look at what's the best way to answer that. So at its simplest, what we're trying to do is to change someone's behavior. So all we have to do is ask, why is someone not doing X, whatever, and X is whatever we want them to do. We find out why that is, and then we test it. So the challenge is essentially to find out, like, if it's an e-com website, what is stopping people from converting?
Yeah.
So you might look at, okay, where do people land? Where do they go next? What are the biggest drop-off points?
Yeah.
Where is the funnel weakest?
Yeah.
What stops people from converting? But also the counter to that, what makes people buy? What is it about the brand or the product or the message that makes them more likely to convert? And how can we emphasize that?
And how do you view kind of like that softer research? So I guess in its simplest form, that could be talking to some customers, or trying to find people that may be on your newsletter but haven't purchased, and just asking them why that's the case.
Yeah.
So that's kind of human like research and conversation versus your data and analytics versus maybe heat map data or that kind of thing. Like, is one more valuable than the other, or can they only be used together?
No, I mean, I think they're all valuable. We will typically use one or more sources to answer every question.
Yeah.
Typically, because you could get there's no one perfect research method. They all have their own strengths. So typically, when you're doing a few together, that where you see the crossover in insight is where you see the biggest return typically. So if you're trying to find out, like, why do people, or what stops people from converting, which is the kind of fundamental question, you could look at, okay, let's do an on-site survey on the product page and on the cart and in the checkout to see like what's stopping you from completing a purchase, for example, and you might get some data from that. You could also ask people who just made their first order or just completed the purchase, what was one thing that made you hesitate before buying today? Alongside that, you can also do usability tests, both to kind of identify what are the factors that affect someone's ability to convert. Are they getting stuck? Are they getting caught up in certain parts of the user journey and so on?
Yeah.
So there's no one method that's going to be perfect that will answer everything, but you can kind of triangulate it from.
So it's really about building like a very clear sense of what's going on, backed up by data.
Yeah.
And trying to get confident in a few different hypotheses.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, to come back to the point that you made right at the start in terms of what we do being perceived as hard or challenging, I think this is that's totally fair, and this is part of the reason for it, which is to do this stuff well, you have to take the time to do the hard work.
Yeah.
Like conversion optimization, it's not like, I don't know, SEO or PPC or any kind of vaguely technical discipline. Like you could stop anyone on the street and show them a website and say, what's one thing that you would change on this?
Yeah. And
they could probably have an idea.
Yeah.
If you ask them like, what one change would you make to improve their on-site SEO, they probably wouldn't have a clue unless you happen to pick someone who did. Whereas what we do, how can you make things better? Like anyone can have an idea of that, which makes it very easy for people or very tempting for people to go in to like head first, diving in to start coming up with random test ideas and then seeing what happens.
Yeah, and I guess, is that more risky? Do you think that's more of a risk when it's a program being run by an internal team who are used to their own internal language or inside the bubble?
Yeah.
Perhaps compared to working with a partner or gathering information outside, because there must be a risk of, well, we know what the website is, we know the history, we know our customers, therefore we must know what the problem is.
You can absolutely get that. I think another factor that tends to affect the internal teams is that they get the requests coming in from other people within the business that may not be data driven, and it's more like people testing out their fun ideas, and there's that's totally fair to a degree. Like it's absolutely fine to have that approach, but you want to make sure that at the very least you're taking the time to understand the fundamentals, like which parts of the website have the biggest opportunity. Like we've spoken with clients in the past where they say like we want to focus our efforts on optimizing the checkout, and we look at it and we say, well, actually you've got a super high conversion rate throughout the checkout, but your product page sucks, and that's where the biggest opportunity is.
Right,
so
I see.
You can do test over there, but actually testing over here is where you're going to see the biggest return.
So you've really got to understand where that biggest win is.
And it's not always hard. It's not that hard to do that, but the hardest thing is to understand user motivation and behavior, because often what someone will tell you in a survey or a user test might be correct. It's probably what they think is correct, but it doesn't always correlate with actually, if you test it, they might show a completely different behavior.
Yeah, interesting. It's such a deep topic, I think, and requires understanding of how to conduct good research, how to understand the user behavior, how to understand what's in the mind of your customers. There's so much to it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then the discipline of testing properly as well. And it's a fascinating topic. In terms of, say you've got a business that's maybe not quite as established as some of the sites that you've mentioned, so traffic's a bit low, maybe it's a startup or something like that. Like what can you do if there isn't the traffic volume to do like really significant A/B testing, but common sense suggests that there's a different, a certain different set of things that you could maybe try, or like where would you start in that scenario? Yeah,
so you can, the first thing to do is to see, like, can you still run A/B tests but scale back the criteria? So typically people will have fairly standard statistical requirements when they run a test. You can always pull that back, so you can reduce the confidence that you're measuring to in the experiment. You could change the KPI as well. So if you're an e-com site, and typically you'd want the the KPI to be order conversion rate, for example.
Yep.
You could pull it back to add to baskets instead.
Yeah.
Because that will have a higher conversion rate. It will be easier to detect the difference.
Yeah.
So you can do stuff like that, which can make a big difference, and it's not going to be as accurate, but it's better than not testing.
Yep.
But if you do that and it's still not feasible, then essentially the best thing to do is to follow the same approach and methodology to understanding the user behavior and the user motivation, but essentially making the changes without testing them.
Yeah, I guess that's also a challenge with certain B2B companies. Like we work with B2B clients that occasionally are like very low volume in terms of conversions, but are very high value leads. So, you might be getting 10, 15, 20 leads a month. So to do a significant or an A/B test that's statistically significant would take you it would take you a very long time, wouldn't it? So what do you do then? And that it's not necessarily even a small business. That's
I think we see it a lot in that in B2B, in luxury also. I think you can kind of pull back the strictness of the experiments if you want. So you could say, well, let's measure engagement with the website, for example, or downloads of a white paper or whatever. You can do stuff like that. But then if that doesn't work, then like you've got, I guess, guesswork on one end of the spectrum, and you've got A/B tests, or even kind of the meta-analysis of A/B tests at the other end of the spectrum. In fact, if you look at if you search for hierarchy of evidence, you can see a pyramid that essentially says, like, you've got A/B tests and the kind of a program of A/B tests at the top, and then you can kind of filters down through different layers in terms of the type of research that you can use to inform your work. So just because you can't go all the way to the top doesn't mean you should just scrap it all together. It means you kind of go to the next rung down or the next rung down. So if you're a B2B site and you don't have the volume to A/B test, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't talk to your customers, understand their motivation, find out what prompted them to fill out the form, what their hesitations were, see how they respond, put your website in front of someone and have them kind of narrate you through it as they use your website.
There is always something that can be done, essentially. I guess it's really difficult. So that when we're running PPC campaigns, for example, in those situations, you're like, well, if you just look at it purely on numbers, it's really tough. But if you start to if you've got the right information in terms of like keyword data right through to the sale, you can track back and go, well, actually, although we've got small volume, the majority of the decent stuff is coming from these areas, and you can just build up a pretty clear sense of what's going on without a huge amount of information. But I guess it's probably, I'm guessing it's just a totally different approach when you've got that niche high value B2B service compared to like a Domino's, for example.
Yeah, totally.
Cool. So I guess to wrap up, again, going back to the kind of, if someone's wanting to get started with CRO or investigate it further, where should they go to find out a bit more? Like any recommended reading or listening or anything like that?
So, for some of the content that we've put out that I'm most proud of will be on our blog in terms of, we've written a detailed post on creating an experimentation framework, which is a very, very good starting point. Like I say, people's tendency is to kind of dive straight on in and come up with some experiments and run them and see what happens. And then if they don't work, they get disillusioned and move on to the next thing. But if you follow a framework, and we kind of go into detail on how we approach ours and share the methodology behind it, then it means you've got a much more structured, rigorous program in place. It's one of the main reasons why we get that stupidly high win rate when we run experiments with our clients. So I think that would be the first place to start. I think the other thing that I would encourage people to consider is, I guess, with experimentation, don't just kind of limit yourself to how we're going to optimize on-site performance. You should also be considering what are the questions that we want to answer with experimentation. So, if you were, if you were playing a game, you had one version of your business over here and another version of your business over there. What change would you make? Like, what would happen if we doubled our price, or what would happen if we offered same day delivery, or what would happen if we cut 90% of the products that we offer and only sell 10%, or that kind of level of change. Like, how do you think about the stuff within your business which you do because that's the way we've always done it? Like, those are the kind of questions that I think show the true potential with experimentation. It's both about optimizing the on-site performance, but it's also about answering the questions that you can't answer anywhere else.
Fascinating. Thanks. And to get that framework, it's conversion.com.
Yes,
Go to
and
the blog,
if you just,
as the name suggests.
Yeah, search for experimentation framework and conversion.com, and it should pop up.
Perfect. Well, look, thanks so much, and that was a really interesting chat. Thanks, Stephen.
Cool. Thank you.